Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Gaming with me, Tony Mo, and I'm here today to bring you guys my first impressions of a beautiful little game called Song of the Deep. Song of the Deep is a metroidvania-style action-adventure game that has you taking on the role of a young girl by the name of Marin, who has built her own makeshift submarine to head out into the depths of the ocean to search for her missing father. It's being developed by Insomniac, and it's going to be releasing on PC, PlayStation 4, and Xbox One tomorrow, July 12th, digitally, for $14.99 USD. I have a lot to say about Song of the Deep. As I said, this is a beautiful little game, completely unexpected from my point of view anyways, from Insomniac. I had no idea they were working on this, and all of a sudden here it is, and I'm playing it, and I'm covering it, and I'm like, whoa, this is a beautiful little game. Like, well done, Insomniac. I also think Song of the Deep fills a really interesting role in the market. One that has become less and less popular as time has gone on. The role that I'm talking about is games that are straight up games that appeal to a really, really wide audience in terms of age group. So when I look at Song of the Deep, I see a game that I can play comfortably as a 26-year-old, get a good challenge out of on the harder difficulties, really enjoy the story, definitely have some emotional investment into the characters and their journeys. But at the same point in time, I could see as an adult or a parent playing this alongside of my 5 or 6-year-old, or passing the controller with my 8 or 9 or 10-year-old. Like, it definitely has that value to it. That's something that used to exist in heaps. Pretty much every game that came out back in the days of the NES and the Super NES, you know, Metroid and Castlevania themselves, and Mario and Battletoads and Crash Bandicoot and Spyro the Dragon, obviously all with their own difficulty curves, but nonetheless playable by a ridiculously huge age range. Nowadays, we have things that are more targeted towards that really young number, 5, 6, 7, 8-year-olds, you know, Skylanders and Disney Infinity and the Lego games, and admittedly, I'm not saying that you can't play them as an older person, but they just don't really offer straight up gameplay experiences like Song of the Deep does. And for that reason, Song of the Deep's, it's a special little game just because of that for me. And I, you know, honestly, what I just said in terms of being a parent with a 5 or 6-year-old looking for a game that they can comfortably play alongside of their child, that their child's going to be able to enjoy and potentially even grab the controller and get involved with, Song of the Deep is totally that game. And it provides, while albeit not completely original, a really great story and experience to match. And I think that's one of the first things you're seeing while you're seeing Song of the Deep here, is that it is a incredibly beautiful game. I think they've just nailed it with the environmental art, with the design. There's a huge amount of diversity between the different locations that you're going to visit underwater. The map itself is really quite big. It provides a lot of opportunities for backtracking. You can explore previous areas multiple times, gain access to certain puzzles that you couldn't previously complete after finding an upgrade later down the road for your submarine. It's, you know, all of that puzzle and exploration depth that you want from a Metroidvania style experience, and I think it's done really, really well. I think it takes a lot of those core elements that we call, you know, Metroid or Castlevania inspired, and it definitely does them justice. It enhances and improves on them in many cases. The one area of the game that I think some people will be disappointed with is the core combat difficulty. Now, I think there's a lot of variety in the combat. I love the diversity in the different underwater creatures that you deal with. They range from very simplistic. Some of them have projectile-based weapons. Some of them, like the jellyfish, have like an AoE shock field that can actually overwhelm you very easily if you're not careful. And as you move through the different areas of the map, you deal with different enemy types that have different attacks. They have different attack patterns. You have to deal with them in different ways. That's a really big strong point of the game. But the core difficulty, even on the hardest difficulty, which is hard, there's easy, normal, and hard, isn't anywhere near what you might find in a game like Metroid or Castlevania. And I think a lot of the Metroidvania style experiences that have come out in the last, 5 years have went for a more hardcore combat experience. Song in the Deep really isn't about that. Like I said, it's a more relaxed combat experience, and I think that's a good thing because that does allow it to appeal to a wider age range, and I think that's, like I said, that's kind of what makes Song of the Deep special to me. So I wouldn't mark it as a huge negative, but I would just keep that in mind if you're considering picking up Song in the Deep, that you're not going to have that hardcore combat experience that you might be expecting if you're thinking this game is going to fall directly in line with something like Metroid or Castlevania. But that doesn't mean that the game doesn't have challenges, and I think some of the areas where the game is most successful in terms of challenging the player are the puzzles as well as environmental navigation. And I really enjoy what they've done with the environmental navigation because it ties heavily into the way that they've designed the underwater environments. So there's a big emphasis on using the currents as a sort of barrier for the player to have to navigate and get around. And then also making sure that the player is using as many of the submarine's abilities and upgrades as possible to complete certain navigational puzzles. So you have the traditional puzzles. A big part of that, as I said, is unlocking the upgrades so you can maybe open a certain doorway or breach a certain area of the map. But one really great example, when I made my way out into the maw for the first time, which is sort of the edge of the reef that leads out into the greater, deeper ocean, I had to make my way to the top of the maw to get to Skeleton Reef. The current was so strong there, though, that I couldn't just use my submarine's booster engine to push all the way to the top. So they actually had anchors that were hanging off the different pieces of rock, and I had to combine that with my claw, which is sort of the primary tool of the submarine. Use this for basic attacks, use it to hook onto things to make your way through currents, and that's exactly what I had to do here. I had to hook onto the anchors, boost and swing like a monkey through the currents, and then keep grabbing the anchors to climb my way up. That's the kind of mechanic that you would expect to find if you were playing as an individual human being element, but to be able to do that while you're inside of the submarine, that's really cool. They really thought about, how they wanted the player to be able to interact with the environment, navigate, and engage in combat via the submarine. I really appreciate that. I think they did an outstanding job with that, and it feels rewarding, and it's a lot of fun to make use of all of the different abilities of the submarine simultaneously. And I will say that despite the combat not being super hardcore, there are definitely some areas where it starts to get difficult. Once I hit the 2-hour mark, and specifically, there were definitely some greater challenges, a lot of mini bosses that I had to deal with, and I started to really fluidly use the hook shot and the boost and my different abilities, and the combat started to get really fun. And the fact that you can actually grab like sea urchins and objects off the ocean floor and then use them as projectiles via the hook also adds into that. So you can sort of do like 2 or 3 attacks almost simultaneously. You can pick up a urchin, you can throw it at a jelly, and then hook shot an urchin that's attacking you. I like that. And as I said, there's a lot of diversity in the enemies. So you're going to run into mini bosses that have like pulse technology, a lot of the stuff that ties into the story of the game. And this is where you start to get the really cool fantasy elements of Song of the Deep, because before Marion's father went missing, he would come back from his trips. He's a sailor. He'd go out to sea, and he would tell her these stories. He would sing her these songs about all these wonderful creatures and beings and beasts that lived in the ocean, and she just took them as stories. But as you find out in the game, much of what Marion's father told her, if not all of it, was actually true. So that's where you get a lot of these cool fantasy elements, these different beings and these people that you meet underwater. It's, like I said, it's not super original, but it's still really fantastical, and it's all so well composed and executed that it just feels really special. And it does, when I talk about the game being really adaptable in terms of the different age groups that can play it, it reminds me so much of some of the really great books that I was read as a child. Anything by Mercer Mayer, wonderful characters, just breaking out of what is real and really allowing you to indulge your imagination. And that's definitely what this game is about, and why I think it would fit so well for a younger audience. Why I think it is the perfect fit, for the game to play alongside of your 5- and 6-year-old. It does just so damn well there. Now, the puzzles themselves are super abundant, and it seems that, as I was pushing into the 2-hour mark, every puzzle that I was encountering was different. I didn't see the repetition of many puzzles, and as you go into the different areas of the map, you start to deal with more navigational puzzles. There's a lot of little treats. It's a really well-designed game. And I don't know what it is, but it's just like when I first jumped into the game, and I saw the way the story was presented, it gave me that vibe of like, oh, this seems like something, that's going to be perfect for a much younger age group. I don't know if I'm going to find much challenge here. And then to have that, constantly proven, to have my thoughts on that constantly proven wrong as I went into a new area and I had a new challenge to encounter, a new puzzle to solve, was a nice touch. Nothing super like frustrating, like break out the pen and paper, but always enough of a difficulty curve to keep me thinking and to provide a level of gratification and reward once I actually completed said puzzle.
pieces of his boat.
Now, we talked about how beautiful the game is, and I think to wrap things up, you know, the overall like narration in the game I think is really well done. Just the tone of the story and the vibe, it feels like a proper adventure. There's a great sense of discovery and the ability to have, you know, this more open world, this entire area that you're in, you know, this huge expanse of the game world. You know, you can retread it, you can revisit it, you can go back and solve puzzles, you know, after you've unlocked a certain upgrade for your ship, you can warp between the different zones like the Maw and the Morrow. It's a really open experience. It never feels confined, it never feels linear, and that definitely lends that sense of exploration and discovery. It just feels like you're on this really great grand journey to find your father. You know, and I think at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how the story ends or the culmination of it or the final boss fight, it's the adventure itself that will have been so worth your time. So there you have it, guys, my first impressions of Song of the Deep. Honestly, I can't recommend it enough. You know, just the first 2.5 hours that I put into the game now have been absolutely enjoyable. This is the type of the game that I expected to sit down and play and never want to touch after I was done doing my first impressions video. But I'm going to play this through the rest of the weekend. I'm going to sit down with my girlfriend actually, and we're going to play it together. It's a really beautiful experience. One that, as I said, if you're an adult, it has some children, and you're looking for that game that you can sit down and personally enjoy and personally be challenged by, but still be able to share with them, Song of the Deep is very much that game. Kudos to Insomniac for nailing that sort of, you know, weird area of the market, whether it was intentional or not, I don't care. They did a fantastic job of it. If you have any other questions for me regarding Song of the Deep, anything that might help you make your purchase decision a little bit more easy, let me know down in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.